short kind of thing going this morning, so please bear with me. This morning's program has been long awaited. The name of it is Aging Well, Keeping Your Mind Fit, and it's a lot about Alzheimer's and quite a bit about all kinds of things related to it. Now, not so long ago, in most of the developing countries in the world, United States, Great Britain, and whatnot, on the average, people only live till, like, believe it or not, 47, okay? And today the official average life expectancy is 77, but many of us know 85, 84 seems to be the magic number at this point for lots of folks in the States. So that's a gain of more than 30 years over what it was 40 years ago or so. And it has tremendous implications in terms of everything the baby boomers retiring and putting a stress on the Social Security system and all of that. And so more typically what happened years ago was people would work into their 50s and 60s, and lots of folks would be dead 5 to 7 years later. So lots have changed, okay? You'll remember during that era, before medicine advanced, lots of people died of strokes and heart attacks. And then their partners died a couple of years later, their wives or husbands. But that doesn't happen anymore. People live good long lives, and then as they get older, some of their cognitive function begins to suffer. And you know, many of our generations, the baby boomers, are kind of the sandwich folks. Then we've got the old-timers on our hands and the youngins that haven't quite graduated and got on their own, or they're just getting their feet on the ground. And so the folks that are in a position, our generation, being the caregivers, have lots of stresses and strains on them. And we hope to help folks understand a lot of that, as well as quite a bit about Alzheimer's here this morning. And it's my privilege to introduce to you our old friend Nancy Lucino Dombrowski, who's been with us many times before. And so I won't sound too much like a scratchy record. I'm going to turn the show over to Nancy. Thank you. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Good morning. I'm very happy to be back here today. We're going to start off on a very light note. We have a little video to show you. But I first wanted to find out, I wanted to take a short poll, what each of you are looking to get out of this training. Just if you could just say in 1 or 2 sentences what your purpose is in coming here, other than to get a break from your work. Okay, we'll start with the gentleman in the front.
My mother-in-law, my wife and I believe she's going to show Alzheimer's, and I want to learn more about it.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I just wanted to learn more about the symptoms and what to look for and the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's.
Okay.
My mother is suffering from memory problems, and I just want to be more familiar with the ramifications of that situation.
Okay, great.
I just wanted to get an idea of the symptoms. Because I have parents that are, in their late 60s.
Okay.
Just to get an idea.
Great.
In fact, my mother-in-law and dad live in Memphis, and also some relatives who have Alzheimer's, so I don't know.
Okay.
I'm the father in his 80s. I just want to see what I can do to keep from getting Alzheimer's, and the same thing with myself as I get older.
Okay.
Basically, same thing. I want to know how to age well, so I can avoid pitfalls.
Good.
I feel the same way they do.
Okay.
I just want to learn about it.
All right.
My dad is 90 and he has dementia, and I'm just see if we can find out about what services
Okay.
keep him going.
Great.
And information for myself, just to see where I stand in dementia, Alzheimer's.
Okay. Great. Okay. Well, I want to say that When I was preparing to come here today, I got up this morning, I took a shower, I brushed my teeth, I got dressed, I took my tote that had all of my materials in it that I would need today. I took my car keys, went out, started my car, and drove myself here on a familiar route that I had taken many times before when I used to work here at the FAA. Got here safely, went into the parking lot, noticed the gentleman at the security gate, said hello to them. Got in here, saw a few old friends. Now, I tell you this not to trivialize the experience, but we tend to take our memory for granted. And what I found as I was preparing for this, that there are certain things that we can do to not take our memory for granted. I got here today. I knew how to brush my teeth. I knew how to dress myself. I knew how to operate my car. I knew the route. I didn't get lost. I knew how to get into the building. I recognized the old familiar faces of my friends and the people at the security gate. If a person is moving in the direction of dementia or any kind of cognitive impairment, you start to see changes in their ability to do these things. So we're going to be talking about those things, but I wanted to start off on an overall view of memory so that you can kind of put Alzheimer's and dementia in its proper place. It is a condition of aging. It's not inevitable for all people that they will develop dementia, but there are certain things that you can do to preserve your cognitive powers if you're still young and you're motivated to do such a thing. So the first thing we're going to do is watch this little video.
Can you imagine something bad if you remember the 60s, you weren't really there? Which brought to mind a song. This is kind of a modern day yuppie blues. I'm looking for my wallet and my car keys. Well, they can't have gone too far. Just as soon as I find my glasses, I'm sure I'll see just where they are. I'm supposed to meet someone for lunch today, but I can't remember where or who it is that I am meeting. It's in my organizer somewhere. I might have left it on the counter, or maybe outside in the car. Last time I remember driving was to that memory enhancement seminar. What's that far off distant ringing? And that strangely familiar tone must be the person I am meeting, calling me on my brand new cordless telephone. I might have left it under the covers, maybe outside on the lawn. And I've got just one more ring to go before my answering machine kicks on. Hi, this is Tom, and your call means a lot to me. So leave a message at the tone, and I'll do my best to try to remember to call you back when I get home. Tom, this is Gwendolyn, and I'm trying not to cry. But I've been waiting here for over an hour. I thought you loved me. This is goodbye. Well, the voice sounds familiar. and the name, it rings a bell. Let's see now, where was I? Oh well.
Adorable, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so Bill talked about some of the demographics of aging. These are some of the statistics that I found. We have more than 35.6 million Americans are age 65 plus. By the year 2030, this is expected to double to 71.5 million. In 2002, 4.6 million Americans were 85 plus. And by 2030, this is projected to increase to 9.6 million. So we see that individuals who are 85 plus are the fastest growing segment of our population. That's going to be all of us up there. And we thought we baby boomers would never age. Well, it's going to happen to us. And little changes happen very slowly and inevitably. You have more aches and pains. Your weight gain starts to creep up. Your sleep can become more fragile. It's affected by stress. We're more susceptible to falls, accidents, etc. And then we have the medical issues, things like high blood pressure, sleep apnea, gastro problems. So what we see is that with good maintenance, we can actually have an impact on our own aging. So aging is not something that happens to you. It's something that you choose to do well. And like I said, we're going to start off this talk today talking about memory and aging in general so that we can put it in its perspective. So what are some of the stereotypes that you know about aging? I'll take answers. What are some of the stereotypes?
Forgetfulness.
Excuse me?
Forgetfulness.
Forgetfulness. What else?
Slower to move.
Slower to move.
Difficulty staying asleep.
Difficulty staying asleep. Or how about as soon as you retire, oh, everything goes downhill. Okay? Well, yes, we may forget an item at the grocery store. We may forget a name. These are all very, very common things that happen. We may forget, you may walk into a room to do something and then say, why am I here? We tend to call these things senior moments. I'm not particularly crazy about that term because I think it gives seniors a bad rap, and I think it gives the whole issue of getting older a bad rap. These are kind of some of the normal consequences of aging. So we also know that memory can be affected by anxiety, depression, medications, sleep difficulties, or just trying to do too much. So these are going to be some of the things that we're going to look at in the first part of this program. So what is memory? Very simply put, it's the ability to store and retrieve information. The memory can also be thought of as the warden of the brain. The memory is responsible for watching over our personal history of being. When memory fails, our record of ourselves feels in danger. So here are some of the things that influences memory. Stress, anxiety, fatigue, grief, lack of social interaction. We know that people who are depressed tend to be socially isolated. When they are socially isolated and they don't have enough stimulation, their memory starts to go. How about being distracted, trying to do too much at once, multitasking? Some of the previous memories and biases and perceptions that you may have. Very interestingly, in people who are combat veterans, and we're really thinking about most of the data that we have is on Vietnam vets. They came back from Vietnam, and many of them had very little memory of very traumatic events that had happened to them. So in that kind of situation, there is a inverse relationship between memory and trauma. It actually erases some of it. Alcohol and prescription drugs. If you drink and you go into a blackout, it's a memory loss. Certain prescription drugs, which when prescribed are very effective in reducing certain things that cause you stress, but they tamper with your short-term memory. And then certain illnesses, diabetes, depression, high blood pressure, and then finally dementia. I also have been working with somebody in my private therapy practice who is a child who had multiple operations. She was born with a disability, and in order to correct for this disability, she received many operations, and she was under anesthesia many times for prolonged periods. And she's having neurological problems now. She's in her 20s, and the doctors think that it is probably as a result of all of this anesthesia that she received as a child. So here we are with types of memory. There are two types, short-term and long-term. The short-term memory stores information that you need to remember in the following minutes or hours. So my short-term memory might be where I parked my car when I came into the parking lot this morning. My long-term memory stores information that your brain has retained because it's important to you. It's basic information such as the names of my family members, my friends, addresses, how to do things, places I went to years ago, where I graduated from college, what type of a degree I got, some of the experiences I had as a child. These are all in my long-term memory bank. And what we see is that in people who have cognitive impairment, the short-term memory is usually the first thing to go. For some reason, the long-term memory stays more intact. It could be that with other contaminating factors, that our long-term memory is more intact because the information went in correctly. In other words, it went in at a time when there was less stress in our life, or when we were not taking certain prescription drugs, or when we were really at the peak of our cognitive functioning. So here we are, how anxiety affects memory. When you become anxious, your mind and your body launch into fight or flight mode. Have you ever noticed that if you forgot somebody's name, or you forgot the correct word for something, that if you just kind of dropped back and relaxed, that person's name would come to you fairly quickly? How many people here have had that experience? Practically all of us, okay? That's a very good technique. If you find that you forget something, relax about it, and it will come back. That is the anxiety influencing it. So higher level neurological functions of the brain shut down to a degree if you're more anxious, and anxiety cannot exist in a relaxed body. They are diametrically opposed to each other. And anxiety prohibits good memory, and then we talked about this little technique in order to relax you, decrease your anxiety and improve your memory. So next slide. This is very interesting. I have worked with many people who are depressed. And one of the first things to go when you are depressed is your ability to concentrate and focus. So in many elderly people, the precursor to dementia is often depression. Long-term depression that has gone untreated or undertreated. So that person, they kind of get used to living with that depression, and they don't have as much social interaction, and maybe they don't eat well because they're depressed, and then you see this gradual cognitive decline. So the primary feature of clinical depression is the ability to focus and concentrate. Aside from the usual sadness and a feeling of emptiness, what you see is somebody who usually can't sleep, is having trouble eating, and is having trouble focusing and concentrating. Depressed people lose interest in participating in things that used to give them pleasure. That connection to their past gets interrupted. Depression usually interferes with sleep, and fragmented sleep impairs memory. I said earlier that as we age, our sleep becomes more fragile and more disrupted by stress. So if there is stress in your life and you have depression, if it morphs into depression, so to speak, the depression can, if left untreated, and if the sleep problem goes untreated, you are now into a situation where your cognitive functioning is starting to be affected. And then lastly, this is also very interesting to me, many medications for depression and anxiety can alleviate the depression but can have an impact on short-term memory. Now, how is that? When you are depressed, and I have had episodes of depression, so I speak from personal experience, when you are depressed, what happens is a thought comes into your brain and you can't get rid of it. And it like gets stuck in your brain and it spins and it goes round and round and round and round, and you just keep thinking the same thoughts, the same thoughts, the same thoughts. And it's very troubling because when you go to sleep, you can't sleep because the same thoughts keep coming in. It could be of a recent loss, it could be of some kind of trauma, it could be that you're just worried about things or worried about money or family situations. So when a person starts to take a medication for depression, how the medication works is the medication interrupts that process so that when that thought comes in, instead of it getting stuck and starting to spin, the brain sends it back out. If you've been depressed for a long time, that is a beautiful thing. But one of the downsides of the antidepressant medications is that people often complain that it tampers with their short-term memory. And that is exactly true. So that's the short price that you pay for the antidepressant meds. Okay, next slide. So now we're going to start talking about attention. How is attention related to memory? Paying attention is a sophisticated cognitive function. So if your child is trying to tell you something and your mind is wandering, you're not attending, so that if the child says, I need this paper signed to bring with me to school tomorrow, or you get a bill in the mail and you're not really paying attention, and the bill says your Con Ed service is going to be shut off unless you pay this bill immediately. If you're not really attending, what's going to happen is, it's what the computer people call garbage in, garbage out. So if it's not going into your brain correctly, then you're not going to be able to recall it correctly. You're not going to, if your child says to you the next day, Mom or Dad, how come you didn't sign that piece of paper for me? I'm going on this school trip today. Or the utility company calls to say, well, we're shutting off your service, and you say, I didn't get anything. You weren't attending. Okay? So the more attention that you pay to a set of data, the more likely you are to remember that data. So better attention equals better memory. We talked about attention being active or passive. You need to encode information correctly in order to be able to get it back out. Now there's another disorder that is common in children. We mostly talk about children with attention deficit disorder having problems in being able to perform in school. But attention deficit disorder can actually still exist in adults. And it can be untreated. If you were a child and you had attention deficit disorder, it was hard for you to focus in school, maybe you weren't depressed. And again, there is sometimes a close overlap between depression and that inability to focus thing, and attention deficit disorder, which the primary feature is not being able to focus and concentrate. If you had that as a child and it was never treated, you could still be walking around as an adult with attention deficit disorder. And there are psychiatrists and there are medications that can treat that. So that's something to consider. It may not be that your memory is going, but that you have long-term attention deficit disorder. Okay, so here we are to the types of attention. Concentration, the ability to sustain direct mental energy for a particular task for an extended period. Reading a book beyond your normal comprehension. We've all done that, and we know that we have to really concentrate, and you may say to somebody who's trying to distract you, you have to leave me be for a minute because I have to concentrate on what I'm doing. Or if you're driving a car, my daughter, when she comes in the car with me, sometimes a song comes on the radio or she wants to engage in concentration, in a discussion with me, and sometimes I have to say to her, I'm driving, I have to concentrate, and I have to point out to her that this is a very important thing to be able to watch what I'm doing. So vigilance is different from concentration because it's the ability to detect rarely occurring symbols over an extended period of time. So the example I put there was watching for falling stars, but some people who are vigilant, let's see, say if you live in a household where somebody's drinking and they've stopped drinking, but you want to make sure that they don't start drinking again, you might be vigilant about watching for certain signs that would indicate that they started again. Searching is the ability to pick out a particular type of data among other similar types. So there you're looking at puzzles or looking through a phone book for a particular listing. Then we have selective attention, the ability to direct mental energy toward one activity while blocking out all other information that may be competing for your attention, such as reading a book while you're in a noisy room or in a train. Alternating attention, where you're maybe reading while watching the news. That's where you're trying to do two things at once. Divided attention, performing two different tasks at the same time. Listening to music while washing the dishes. So you see that attention, the amount of attention that you give something obviously affects how much you're going to remember, and how much you will remember and how well you will be able to recall it. So now I'm going to get into a little thing on cognitive energy and fatigue. Attention takes effort, and effort will improve your memory, but each of us has only a finite amount of memory as well as energy. So do tasks that require memory and attention when you are at your peak. If you're a morning person and you have the most energy, you do things like balancing your checkbook or organizing certain things in the morning. You can't remember everything. Some people, you know, I remember as a young person, everybody in my family used to say, oh, Nancy, she has the absolute best memory. And I really did have a phenomenal memory. I could remember old phone numbers. I could remember exactly where I put something. I don't know whether I had a little bit of a visual memory or photogenic memory, but I was very, very good. As I've gotten older, I have to resort to other things. I cannot rely totally on just saying, oh, I have a good memory, I'll remember to do this. I have to write things down. So here is a little technique. Write it down, eliminate distractions, take breaks, and timing. If something is not the right time for you to focus on something, you have to postpone it. And you might postpone until when your kids go to bed or when you are in a quiet place. How memory works. Okay, so now we're getting into more of the real nitty-gritty. We're going to take you through it to see exactly what's going to happen in Alzheimer's and dementia. So before you can remember something, you must first learn the information. So this is called acquisition. And this acquired information is then put in a temporary, it's like a little temporary holding pattern. And this is where short-term memory is stored. So when I drove into the parking lot this morning, and I knew I was going to be leaving in a few hours, I parked my car over in the little short-term area, and I knew that this was not a very important thing that I was going to have to remember. All I needed to do is just go out to my car and remove my car in 2 hours. So that went into short-term memory. As opposed to consolidation. In order to store something in long-term memory, the nerve pathways have to be strengthened and reinforced. This is called consolidation, which can take weeks or even months. Retaining information in long-term memory is more likely if it relates to pre-existing memories or somehow stimulates you emotionally. So I like to talk about sleep. Getting a good night's sleep can really work well to help you to retain information. So say long-term memory might be if you were learning a new job and you could relate some of the tasks and skills that were required at your new job into tasks and skills that you had learned previously. So you make this link so that you're able to consolidate your earlier memories with this new information that you're getting, and it's strengthened and reinforced, goes into long-term memory. And then lastly is retrieval. Okay. When people retrieve information, they're literally recalling it from the nerve pathways. The brain reactivates a particular pathway and the information is remembered. This can be fast or slow depending on how familiar you are with the information and how well you learned it in the first place. Now, I kind of like this to, let's see, when I first started working in the business world, we didn't have computers. We had, actual paper files. Many of you here in my generation, you know about these things. And sometimes you had a little guide as to what your files were, and you knew that certain files you used more frequently and certain files you learned you used less frequently. With computers now, when you store something, when you create a document and you go to store it, you have to remember where you put it. And a lot of the problems when you can't get something out of your computer is either you don't remember where you put it, or there was a problem with the computer. It was encoded wrong, so you can't get it back out of the computer. Well, it's very similar to memory. If you don't put something in correctly, if you don't store it or you don't acquire it correctly, you can't retrieve it correctly. Okay, so some of the changes in memory with age. We see more trouble paying attention to more than one thing at a time. There's a greater effort if you try to learn new things. You may have more difficulty with finding the right word to describe something, recalling names and information, and the things most likely to be forgotten. We talked about that earlier. Names, or where you put something, or telephone numbers, or somebody told you something, or you told somebody else something. I'm always saying to people, did I tell you that already? That seems to be one of my mantras, because I talk to so many people, and sometimes I forget that I told a person a particular story or incident. Now, these changes in memory with age are especially true if you are a multitasker. Because if you're doing many things at once and you're not focusing on how you're doing it, you're going to forget. And the reason that I'm always saying to people, did I tell you that already? Is because I'm always multitasking. And that's something that I always have to work on. So here's how to challenge yourself. Doing mental aerobics. What do we mean by that? What do you think I mean by that? Mental gymnastics.
Stimulating the mind?
Stimulating the mind, right. How do you stimulate your mind?
Keep busy doing things.
Keeping busy, interacting with others, learning to play a musical instrument, doing puzzles, word games, hobbies, playing cards. This Sudoku, I can't do that. Many people can, I can't do it. I only get very frustrated by that. Drives me crazy. But it's a source of pleasure for many people. Volunteering, keeping busy, attending lectures, plays, concerts, reading new books. At my job, when I left here, I started to work at Brookhaven Lab, and I work in the occupational medicine clinic, and we have a little book club going there. And it's really great because we will pass around books to each other that we've already read, or we will discuss some of the books. And it's very, very stimulating. So traveling, gardening, all kinds of new interests. What are some of the things that you people like to do that keep you plugged in? Mom, you read? Okay, reading. What else? Puzzles.
Playing computer games.
Computer games. The only problem with computer games is that, and this is just according to my opinion, is that with computer games, you are by yourself. It's just you and the computer. It would be better if you, I think that the computer can be very challenging, but it can actually restrict your interaction with other people over the long term. What else? What are some of the other things that you all like to do? Yes?
Walking, running, working out.
Walking is, you're going to see when we get to the section on dementia, walking is one of the best antidotes for the prevention of dementia. That's a very good habit. What else? Some of the gentlemen. I'm sure the gentlemen are doing things.
Gardening.
Gardening, excellent. Gets you moving. Woodworking, definitely. Why is that? Why do you find that's good for you?
Well, it's the challenge to do something new for me, to make something new.
Right. So you have the pride of something new, but it's also, it's like a mental puzzle. So you have to be good with your hands, and it reinforces good eye-hand coordination. What else?
I like to cook sometimes.
Cook, that's good. To invite people over.
Relatives.
Good. Okay, so these are all good things that keep you hooked in and keep you, keep your brain functioning well. Okay. So here are some remembering tricks. I have a partial list of some of my own things here. Following a routine, keeping lists, using a calendar, putting important things in the same place every time. If you have one of those little boxes in your house where you put your birth certificates and the deed to your house and your social security cards that you should never carry in your wallet anymore, because if your wallet is stolen, there goes your identity theft. Keeping important things in the same place, getting a file drawer, putting things in that file drawer, labeling things, repeating names when you meet new people, trouble remembering a name or word, you can run through this is the little technique that I use. If I can't remember somebody's name, and I meet a lot of people and they always expect me to remember their name, and when I don't, I'm very embarrassed. So I will put their face in my mind and then go through A, B, C, and usually when I get to the letter of their name, I stop and I say, oh no, okay, I know it begins with an M, and then I start going through common M names, and then usually it comes back to me. And hopefully the person has not walked away, you know, at that point, but it's a little technique. And then also picture mentally where you met this person and then make those associations. Now some of my own little things that I little notes I put on the side. Remove clutter. Clutter is one of the biggest things that will impact on your memory. Does anybody know why? Yes.
It's confusing.
Yes, you're creating a chaotic environment. A chaotic environment out here creates chaos inside. And then when you can't find something, it makes things more frustrating to you and increases anxiety. You can create a small home office center for important documents. Establish a drop spot in your house. That is the to-go place where you put your keys, your mail, things that need to leave with you. Use a handbag that works well for you. My daughter gave me a wonderful bag, and I've always used things that had multiple pockets and zippers, so that this, like my ID badge for my job, goes in the same place. When I take it off, that's where it goes. So that when I reach for it in the morning, I know that's exactly where it is. I have a wallet that's one of the highly organizer type wallets. That way I know where all of my insurance cards are, and the little supply of stamps that I carry, and business cards. Everything has a place. Now, I also brought, for a little show and tell item, something that I've been using. This actually was around long before computers were, and I'm still using it because actually a patient that I once treated who was a post-stroke victim, she had actually learned in cognitive rehab how to use this system, and I actually learned from her that the system that I was using was what they were teaching in cognitive rehab. This is a planner. I'll just hold it up. This is a planner that shows you a week at a glance, okay? So everything that is occurring in my life, or since I also coordinate my daughter's activities, like her doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, everything goes in this book. So in the front of the book are any appointments that I have, or if there's anything that I have to do, I stick a Post-it on it. So when I look at that week, I see the whole week, so it's reinforcing the whole week. If I change an appointment, I write it out and I move it. There's also a marker here for the day. And then in the back of the book, what's great, I don't file it correctly all the time, but when I see when I go to the dog groomer, or if I see a new doctor, or, you know, the landscaper, I get their card, and that card goes in one of these little sections here in the back. So that if in the course of my work day, or the evening when I come home, as the case may be, if I have to call the pediatrician, or call the landscaper, or call the guy to the woman who grooms my dog, everything is all in here. So I'm not saying, where did I put that? Oh, I have to do that later. That only creates more chaos. So if you have everything in one place, this can, in effect, add to your own memory power because it's all there. So that's a little technique. What else? So we talk about the organizer, we talked about the, okay, we can move along. Okay, some more healthy habits. We talked about walking. Exercise increases blood flow to all parts of the body, including the brain. Brain-healthy diets, such as low-fat, cholesterol, high cholesterol, and blood pressure increase your risk for dementia. You would want to consume the antioxidants, all those colorful fruits and vegetables. Either eat a lot of cold water fish or just take a supplement, one of those omega-3 fatty acid supplements. Consider the vitamins B6 and B12. Those are very good. Those are considered the nerve vitamins. Alcohol in moderation. Well, why are we concerned about alcohol? Well, with alcohol, you can suffer falls. Long-term use of alcohol can create something called Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, which is a kind of dementia. The Wernicke part is correctable by thiamine, heavy doses of thiamine. So if you're an alcoholic and you go in for detox, they will usually give you heavy doses of thiamine to get rid of the potential for Wernicke syndrome. But Korsakoff syndrome is what they call wet brain. That is irreversible, and that is from consuming so much alcohol that you've destroyed brain cells. So you would want to protect your head from trauma, which increases the risk when you increase risk of developing Alzheimer's. Use handrails, helmets for sports, seat belts. About a month ago, I fell down the stairs in my house, not because I was drunk, but I got out of balance. I was carrying my dog, and I wasn't using the handrail because the dog was on one side and the handrail was on the other side, and somehow the dog moved or somebody moved. All I knew was that I slid down the stairs. And as I was sliding, I said, I need to protect my head. So as I slid, I had the sense to turn on my side so that as I hit the stairs, it was hitting my rear end and not my head. So very, very important. The stairs are one of the most dangerous things in our houses. And you always want to protect your head from trauma. Sleep becomes more fragmented as we age. Sleep is necessary for the brain to process memories, and memories to form. If you have trouble sleeping, do something about it. You can get a sleep screening. If you're interested in talking about your sleep, give me a call. I can give you some coaching to help you find resources for sleep so you can get diagnosed. Stop smoking. How many people here still smoke? Nobody? Yay. Isn't that cool? Very good. Okay, why is smoking connected to dementia? Because it affects your blood vessels, and your blood vessels need to stay in optimal condition. So if you're suffering from depression, get treated, don't become socially isolated. Okay, dementia. Dementia is the loss of intellectual functioning, also known as cognitive functioning. Persons with dementia may be confused, they may lose skills they once had, they may not recognize family members or friends, and may become agitated. There's all different kinds of dementias. In the handouts that we have for you in the back, you're going to see that you can develop dementia from Parkinson's and from Huntington's disease. So dementia is more common in older adults. We think of aging as the younger senior citizen and then the old senior citizen. So in the older people, we're talking about mid-80s on up. Dementia, if you're lucky enough to live that long, the likelihood of you developing dementia increases. But it's not necessarily a normal consequence just of getting old. It doesn't mean that as all of us get old, we're going to get dementia. In the Journal of the American Medical Association, there was an article in September of '04, we talked about this, saying that regular walking is associated with a reduced risk of developing dementia. And Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia. Okay? Other causes, we just mentioned this, Parkinson's. Parkinson's is a brain disease which causes tremors and muscle stiffness. What is his name, the actor? See, there it goes, I just forgot his name. Michael J. Fox, okay. He developed it very young. I've known people in their 50s who developed it. Huntington's disease. an inherited disease that causes abnormal movements and eventual dementia. This is, if you have a family member with Huntington's, you have a 50% chance of developing Huntington's. Huntington's is a very sad disease. There is genetic testing that they can do for that, but it's because it's such a horrible disease, nobody really wants to know if they're carrying the gene. You could also get dementia from HIV, tuberculosis, syphilis, meningitis, and encephalitis. So some of the warning signs of dementia. Okay, we all put things sometimes in the wrong place. You lay something down and then say, oh, why did I put my earrings there? Or what did I do with my earrings? But that's not dementia. Dementia is when you take your hairbrush and instead of putting it in the drawer, you put it in the toaster oven. Or you find your car keys in the freezer. It's the odd place. So that's why we tell you, always put things in the same place. A, because it's a cue, so that you know that you'll find it there. But also, that if all of a sudden you're putting things in odd places, or your family member's putting things in odd places, that might be an early warning sign that they're developing dementia. Difficulty performing complex tasks that require a series of actions. Now, what does that mean? Making a meal is a complex task. You have to take the meat out of the freezer. You have to defrost it in the sink. Then you have to put it in a bowl and make it into meatballs or whatever it is you're going to do with it. You fry the meatballs. Then you're making something to go with that meal. So the complex task of making a meal to a person who doesn't have dementia, you know, maybe you don't feel like cooking and, you know, you're like, oh, you know, I'll just get takeout tonight. But somebody who has dementia has trouble figuring out, how do I turn on the stove? How do I use that toaster oven again? I don't remember how to do that. Or they start putting weird things in the toaster oven. They may become disoriented in situations that were formerly familiar. There's an aunt in my husband's family who's developing dementia. And she's forgetting that her daughter is, she can't remember that her daughter is 4 years older than my daughter. And she's saying, oh, when your daughter goes to college, my daughter will be there with her. And, you know, she's forgetting all these things. We were at a wedding recently, and a member of my husband's family who has Parkinson's, he was there. It was actually his daughter who was getting married. And I went up to him, and it was his daughter's wedding day, and she looked absolutely beautiful. And I said to him, your daughter looks absolutely beautiful. And he looked at me and he said, oh, which daughter? And I said, the bride. And he said, oh yes, it's her wedding day. So, very sad. He's really not all that old, but that's part of his Parkinson's. Pronounced changes in behavior, such as the person becomes more agitated, they may become more argumentative, or they may become delusional. Confabulation. All right, what's confabulation? When somebody has a memory problem and they can't account for how they got from here to there, they may, confabulation is I wouldn't call it outright lying, because lying would imply an intent, but they make up a story. So maybe the person who has dementia leaves their house and doesn't have their keys and doesn't have their coat, and they arrive at a neighbor's house, and the neighbor says, oh, but Mrs. So-and-so, how did you get here? You don't have your code or your house keys. So the person may say, my son drove me. That would be a confabulation. In other words, to make up another story to account for the fact that they don't know how they did it. That memory wasn't there with them. So it impairs the person's abstract thinking and judgment, and they have difficulty with familiar tasks such as using the phone, toaster, we talked about that, and they become really very disinterested in their usual activities that they've been doing every day. Okay, some statistics on Alzheimer's. In the United States, someone develops Alzheimer's every 72 seconds. There are approximately 5.1 million Americans who suffer from Alzheimer's, and 4.9% are 65 and over, and 1 in 8 persons 65 and over has Alzheimer's disease. Some of the risk factors. Unfortunately, the men are more at risk than women. I wonder why that is. I wonder if it's... I think if you're a man and you're suffering from depression, get the depression treated, because that we know is associated with the development of Alzheimer's or dementia. Advanced age, the genetics, if you have it in your family, you have a greater chance of getting it. If you've had a serious head injury, and then we look at cardiovascular disease, there's a strong correlation between your heart health and the development of vascular dementia. So how can you have an impact on this? All this sounds very dismal. See your doctor, maintain your health, do your physical, get all the screenings that they want you to do when you're 50, and do the annual checkup. If you are supposed to be taking high blood pressure medication, take it. If you're diabetic, keep tight control over your blood sugar. Take your Zocor or any of the other medications that might be indicated for cholesterol. Also, if you have a sleep problem, if you have sleep apnea that is untreated, how does that affect your cardio health? Does anybody know?
You stop breathing every night.
If you stop breathing, you're putting stress on your heart. The more stress you put on your heart, the more likely you are to develop high blood pressure, because when the airway collapses and you're gasping for air, your heart is pumping harder and harder in order to make you breathe, and you're not breathing. So you can have a stroke in your sleep, or you develop high blood pressure, or we also know that there's a close connection between untreated or undertreated sleep apnea and the eventual development of diabetes. So diabetes is all connected to this. So by tweaking your sleep and having your regular checkups and using your doctor and maintaining good health, you can actually stave off the development of different dementias. Okay, so causes. Scientists don't completely understand the causes. The German physician, Dr. Alzheimer, discovered abnormal structures in the brains of some women, and these structures, called plaques and tangles, they blocked communication along different parts of the brain, and then they prevented blood flow, and the result is the deterioration of parts of the brain. Okay, diagnostics. Usually the primary care physician refers and oversees the diagnostic process. That's the first person that you might turn to. No single test exists. The diagnosis is made by a specialist, which is usually a neurologist, who's a specialist in pathology of the brain and nervous system. So they give you a physical, they take your blood, urine, they check your reflexes, your coordination. Then they may ask for additional tests, such as an MRI, a CT scan, a PET scan. And lastly, what the family members say is going on is especially valuable. So if this is going on in your family, the person who is most most often around the person who may have dementia. It's important for that person to go with them to the doctor so the doctor knows exactly what's happening. Okay, the most common dementia. We talked about the Huntington's and the Parkinson's. You can see that in your handout. You would want to manage your symptoms with the input from the medical team. The medications cannot cure Alzheimer's, but can contribute to a better quality of life and actually slow down the progression of it. There are currently 20 medications in clinical trials or waiting for that's supposed to be FDA approval, not FDS. Some of the non-drugs, exercise, good sleep, and trying to maintain a low-stress lifestyle. Some of the psychiatric symptoms, some of the agitation and the delusions can be alleviated by the use of psych meds, but the psych meds need to be monitored very carefully. The person just can't be put on psych meds and not be monitored by the psychiatrist. Okay, so some of the stages. There's actually different models for this. There was one thing that I saw that said that there were 7 stages to Alzheimer's, which was really a little too cumbersome. The model that I used broke it down into 3 stages. So the first stage was mild Alzheimer's disease, which can last 2 to 4 years, and that's where the diagnosis can be most difficult. It often requires only minimal assistance, the person that is, 2 to 3 hours a day, and usually the person can live independently. The memory problem in this stage is usually the most prominent part. The person may be repeating the same things, have the same questions, difficulty finding words, difficulty naming certain objects, losing things easily, getting lost when driving, easily confused, little math problems, losing interest in activities, and then lastly, the personality changes. Then we see stage 2, moderate. Now this is the longest stage. This can last 2 to 10 years. And this is really the most labor intensive and the most difficult for family members because of the need for supervision, which is usually anywhere between 4 and 8 hours a day. The person has more trouble living independently. The symptoms worsen. They may have significant difficulties remembering recent events. They may have some difficulties in what are ADLs, activities of daily living. They may not be able to dress themselves or cook for themselves, or they may have, they may soil their pants. They may pace around a great deal. They may become fearful or anxious for unknown reasons. And then you see more of what we would consider psych-like symptoms: suspicious, agitated, depressed. Because the brain, basically the brain is shrinking. They're losing brain cells. So they become more childlike. And then lastly, they may develop delusions and or hallucinations. Okay? Stage 3, severe Alzheimer's, and that can last between 1 and 3 years. And at the very end, the person usually has lost their sense of self. They usually don't recognize anyone. A very close family member of mine had Alzheimer's, and by the very end, she was in a nursing home, and she was pretty much like curled up like a little baby. But after her initial diagnosis, I would say she did live about another 10 years until she passed away. So she did require 24-hour nursing care and supervision. And when a person has Alzheimer's, death is usually from secondary causes such as pneumonia. And the symptoms might be extreme confusion, disorientation, inability to communicate, very severe memory deficits, and they obviously cannot perform their activities of daily living. So when you care for a person who has dementia or Alzheimer's disease, my first recommendation is don't try to be a family superhero. Know that there will come a time when you will turn your job over to a professional. And you want to be aware of your own stress level. Recognize that it's a degenerative disease with no known cure. Enlist the help of a professional care manager. Now let me say that available starting next week through Magellan, you now have the services of a geriatric care management team. How many people knew that? Okay, brand new, hot off the press. This is a really, really valuable resource. This will save you several $100s. If you have a family member who you are considering, what is the next step, you want to call that number after October 1st and say, I want to talk to the geriatric care management team. And what they will do is they will send in a care manager to do an assessment. This is at no charge to you. They do an assessment of your situation and they make specific recommendations.
Nancy?
Yes?
Is that for family members too? Is like, can I use that for my father?
I would believe that that's what it's intended for. What I would suggest that you do is contact Bill Tolan, who knows all the parameters of that new part of the contract. Very, very valuable. Out at my other job, we don't have this service for our employees, the geriatric care management. So what we have to do is we send people to look at www.caremanager.org, and they get a care manager that way, and they do the same thing, but they have to pay out of pocket for that. So that is a great thing that's been added to your benefit plan. You would want to find a support system. Develop a big picture view, especially as it relates to the whole financial estate planning matter. Magellan has also added pieces into the contract for that, which we'll get into in a minute. The finances and legal matters will eventually need to be assumed by another person, and it's important to be proactive early after the diagnosis is made. Why is this? Because if you're doing any kind of big picture planning, you want to have usually a geriatric care manager on board, and you want to have an attorney who is very facile with estate planning, and who, if there is going to be a nursing home placement eventually made, that they do it within the parameters of the Medicaid laws. So if you have a family member that's been diagnosed, without rushing them off to go talk to lawyers right away, you want to kind of get them on board with designating somebody in the family who is the point person to make all this stuff happen. And I have to say, having gone through the long illness of my mother, that oftentimes in a family, getting one person designated to do that can be very difficult and stressful, because everybody in the family has a different view about what should be done and when it should be done. Okay, so we talked about this, and this gives you the whole geriatric care management service. And Bill told me especially to remind you that if you want to use this service, don't hesitate, because the more people use it, the more they will enhance it. If they see that it's a valuable benefit to have in the plan, they will keep enhancing it. So don't be shy. So they come into your home, they do the assessment, they do the guidance, the care manager will recommend solutions and help you develop a plan. If they are Medicaid eligible, they should be helping you do the Medicaid application. That's very important. And you access all that through the regular EAP number. All right, now, because we are here at the FAA in New York, I did some research on my own, and there is also, through the New York City Department of the Aging, an Alzheimer's and Caregivers Support Center. And it looks as though they're doing the same thing that you're getting through Magellan. But I would, even though you're getting that piece through Magellan, I would also see what these people have to offer through the New York City Department of the Aging. I put down their website address. And here's some more resources. The Long Island Alzheimer's Foundation. I also called all these numbers and checked to make sure that they really exist, and they do. The Alzheimer's Association of Long Island, everybody kind of provides something a little bit different. The Stony Brook Alzheimer's Disease Assistance Center of Long Island. Right over here at LIJ, there's a Memory Disorder Center at Geriatric Medical Group. Offers evaluations, treatment, and psychosocial services, and they're experts at dementia. And then lastly, there's a Memory Disorder Center, which is part of Zucker Hillside Hospital, offers geriatric psychiatrists, psychologists, and social workers, experts in diagnosis and treatment. And there was one more that should have been on there. There's also, for some reason, Bill must have had an earlier version of the PowerPoint that I sent him. There is at NYU Medical Center some research being done on Alzheimer's. And if any of you are interested in that, I have that phone number out at work, and you could just ask Bill and he can get it to you. Okay? The legal services provided by Magellan. This is quite an array of stuff. This is what we would call an EAP, concierge services, because you really get kind of one-stop shopping. Personal and family legal services, civil community issues, contracts, partnerships, real estate, criminal matters, free initial consult, and discounts for continued services. Initial free consult on wills is part of the core legal thing. Interactive online will service, simple wills, low cost, other things, mediation services. It's really quite extensive now. And here are the exceptions. Obviously, they don't want to get into a conflict of interest with your employer, so any kind of employment-related issues, participants' financial planning, stocks, blah, blah, blah. That's all self-explanatory. And here is the a la carte stuff from the financial part. That's all self-explanatory, and you access through the same 1-800 number. These are all program enhancements. More on financial, unlimited 1-hour consultation calls, assistance to formulate financial planning, consults for higher level of financial aid, retirement planning, preparation of income taxes. This is unbelievable. Okay. And here's your EAP. So I put multiple points of access. So you can either come in and talk to Bill. You could go to Magellan's website. You could call the 800 number. You could see somebody out in the community. If anybody wanted to come see me, I'm a Magellan contracted EAP provider. If you had something you wanted to discuss, you now have 8 visits in which to do it. Formerly the contract was you only had 4 visits with an outside provider, but when they got rid of the on-site services, they gave you 4 more free visits out in the community. So if you're here in Queens or you want to come talk to me, I'm in Forest Hills, or if you live in Timbuktu, you call that 800 number and you say, I want an on-site EAP counselor in Timbuktu. And then we talked about all of the financial and elder care stuff, and that's the end. Any questions?
Did we just, okay.
Question for you. That geriatric care management, is that for family members as well? Starting October 1st? Like, can I have somebody go to my father?
I'm not quite sure that the way you're asking the question.
Well,
If it's your father,
right.
okay, then you're essentially the primary client. And if you need somebody to go out and do an evaluation on him, that's what it's all about.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
Because if if they would say, if it were that it was only for employees, you wouldn't be working if you needed a geriatric care manager. So I would theorize that this is something to help employees deal with problems in their families.
And it's very important that we use the service, especially this year, because if we don't use it, it'll kind of become half of what it could be. And it's also important to know that you can also, after the initial assessment period, you can go back to Magellan and say, well, look, I need a little more help than just the assessment. I want to, get my 8 sessions and, cover the other things that I might need. And what will end up happening if enough people do that, they'll end up developing a super specialty in aging, and then, we'll be able to get that 8 sessions to truly apply towards aging issues. The other one thing I wanted to mention really quickly was in some of the handouts, there's this wonderful other website besides Magellan, which is fabulous by itself. You'll notice on some of them, it's medicalnewstoday.healthology.com. There are about a dozen videos related to aging issues on that website. You just have to poke around a little. And actually, it's much broader than that. And there's all these 3 to 5 minute videos, which are really quite good. So you might want to access that. And it's right on some of your handouts.
Right, another thing, Bill wanted me to mention to you this book, which is really like a Bible. It's called How to Care for Aging Parents. And the author's name is Virginia Morris, and it is 1895 through Workman Publishing, New York. You can probably.
When I call the 800 number, the 1-800-1234, they sent me that book and another rather large book on how to care for aging parents.
For free?
They sent it to me for free.
Wow.
Terrific.
What a great thing.
It's the same thing. I called the number and, I asked him for some help with him. I want to get somebody in, come in and do some cognitive, puzzles with him or whatever.
Right.
They weren't able to help me with that, but they did send me those books.
Right.
And the book is really terrific. There's so much in there.
I'll get somebody in. I really want to find somebody to go in an hour a day and just do, things with
Right.
them.
What you need is an aide.
We have it. We have a full-time. They pay for a nurse, but I want somebody to come in who knows about the cognitive function. She don't do any of that.